Oh, sorry. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the fourth annual Freedom Convention, Turkey. With this year's convention, we aim to highlight pressing issues in Turkey, including democratic regression, the rule of law's collapse, abuse of anti-terror laws, constraints on freedom of expression, and widespread decline in human rights. We also will explore the potential impact of utilizing ECHR, European Court of Human Rights mechanisms, and the United Nations avenues for positive changes in Turkey. And on the occasion of Human Rights Day today, December 10th, we like to enhance understanding of Turkey's multifaceted challenges and present strategies for effective engagement with the global human rights community to amplify our collective voice and advocate for those silenced by oppressive regimes. This said, before our distinguished speakers, I'd like to briefly touch on authoritarianism and gender-based violence in Turkey. But first of all, I would like to say welcome to our distinguished speakers and thank you for joining us today on this very important, significant day. So I believe it's very well known that women in Turkey have faced continuous oppression within the historical context of Turkish Republic and discrimination from various sources, governments, society, and different institutions, state, religious, or educational institutions or corporations, workforce. And the government's stance on women's issues has been inconsistent, changing not only between different administrations, but also within the same administration over time. And gender, sexuality, women's bodies, and women's rights have been used as proxies in Turkey's politics. And in the historical context of Turkey, both secularists and political Islamists have employed gender and sexualized discourses to secure their electoral support, advance their agendas, and consolidate their power, political influence. One instance is the perception among secularists that matters like women wearing hijabs or headscarves pose a threat to the secular and democratic public arena. They prohibited the wearing of headscarves, hijabs in state institutions or on university campuses. Later, the AKP government portrayed the same hijab, the same headscarf ban as an act of victimization and lifted it. And initially, the AKP government appeared to enhance women's rights with promises of democratic reforms, including lifting hijab restrictions in 2013, as I mentioned earlier. However, these changes often reinforce patriarchal ideas, portraying ideal conservative women as mothers. And the AKP used women's issues to regulate sexuality and reproduction in alignment with conservative gender ideology and neoliberal economic policies. While the AKP initially collaborated with women's civil society groups and made progressive changes, such as amending the penal code in 2004, its stance on feminist demands, women's demands, shifted after 2011 towards a more authoritarian approach. And Turkey's move toward authoritarianism gained momentum around 2010, with the AKP using Islamist discourse to gain conservative support and shaping traditional women's roles, impacting intimate decisions and practices such as family size, the number of kids, abortion rights, and public behavior, or laughing in the public, for example. And gendered racism in Turkey encompasses discrimination, bias, and violence directed at women based on their gender or intersecting identities such as race, ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation. Deep-rooted patriarchal traditions in the country have historically marginalized and oppressed women. Recent years have witnessed a surge in gender-based violence, femicide cases, and discrimination, particularly affecting marginalized women, Kurdish women, women who are Gulen movement volunteers, and even refugee women often confront various forms of discrimination, including hate speech, harassment, and violence. Although the Turkish government has taken some measures to address the issues such as adopting the Istanbul Convention in 2011, Turkey was one of the first signees of the Istanbul Convention. Enforcement and implementation has been inadequate. Notably, Turkey withdrew, unfortunately, from the convention in 2021, 2 years ago, contributing to a rise in femicide cases and impunity in femicide cases. Kurdish women in Turkey encounter substantial challenges concerning their rights and freedoms. Despite active advocacy for increased rights and autonomy for the Kurdish population, they continue to face obstacles, including violence and discrimination. Similarly, women volunteering within the Gülen movement have been dismissed there from jobs, stigmatized as terrorists, detained arbitrarily, even with babies, kids. Women from ethnic and religious minorities, as well as LGBTQ individuals, are also contend with social, cultural, and economic marginalization and discrimination in Turkey, experiencing various forms of discrimination. Given the abuse of laws and corruption in judiciary, legal protections for their rights are insufficient, and the Turkish government faces criticism for its inadequate response to state-sanctioned gender-based violence and the lack of support services. After this brief overview of democratic regression authoritarian actions with a focus on gender, I will now introduce our first speaker, who will explore minorities and Turkey's assertive foreign policy in a greater detail. Our first panelist is Baskın Oran. Baskın Oran is an emeritus professor of political science. He was fired 4 times from the university during 2 military coups in 1971 and 1980. Professor Oran is a columnist at the weekly newspaper Agos, also publishes weekly at artıgerçek.com and academia.edu. Baskın Oran is the author of the 2004 official Minority and Cultural Rights Report, one of the 4 initiators of We Apologize to Armenians, which was published in 2008. Professor Oran was also a member of the Vice Persons Committee in the Kurdish peace process in 2013. His work is focused on Turkish foreign policy, nationalism, and in particular minorities. Professor Oran is the author of 26 books, 3 of which are also published in the United States and France, and over 90 scholarly articles. You can access them in his official personal website, www.baskinoran.com. And his latest book in English was Ethnic and Religious Minorities, which I have here as a very significant source for my dissertation thesis. And also he has in Turkish 100. Yıldız Lozan ihlalleri, again in Turkish Yunanistan ile Türkiye, azınlıklar ve Ege. Professor Oran, first of all, I would like to thank on behalf of ASD for joining us today on the Human Rights Day, and floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Hafsa, my friend. Dear friends, greetings to you all in the International Human Rights Day today. Here, I would like to make a critical summary of domestic and foreign policies of Turkey from the point of view of human and minority rights. First, the domestic policy. Speaking of democracy, the nation state, not to mix with national state, the nation state established by the Turkish Republic in 1923 both deepened and broadened the nationalist ideology of the Committee of Union and Progress of the late Ottoman Empire. In the Balkans and the Middle East, religion and denomination are the main elements of social identity rather than race or language. This is due to the residue of the millet system of the empire since 1454. The new republic removed the autonomy of non-Muslim citizens and carried out their ethno-religious cleansing because as non-Muslims, they were not considered assimilable As simple as that. On the other hand, the regime began to assimilate non-Turkish Muslims. Only the Kurds, for many reasons, resisted to this assimilation, at least in part, and were demonized for disrupting unity and solidarity of the country. This created a picture of Turkey wherein other sub-identities, particularly non-Muslims and the Kurds, were marginalized. This situation diminished to a degree with the EU reform packages released between 2001 and 2004, and the AKP, the representative of Islamist ideology, early on issued a number of EU reform packages and began to pursue a policy that would bring relief to non-Muslims, Kurds, and indeed all Turkish citizens, like the Kurdish opening, the Alevi workshops, the Roma opening, etc. Yet, this rapid and radical reform process was cut short at the end of 2004. On October 1st, 2004, there was an attack at the press conference of the Minority Report. The source of the report, the Human Rights Advisory Board of the Prime Ministry, composed of human rights defenders, was de facto dissolved. Erdogan, after a short period of time, did a complete reversal and set about changing state policy in the direction of Islam-inflected autocracy, calling it local and national as opposed to standardized international values. Serious pressures on human and minority rights followed, of course, setting in motion a step-by-step regression, a wave of street nationalism, as they call it, enveloped Turkey, including attacks on non-Muslims, killings and lynch attempts against Roma and Kurds. As another effect of the Kurdish issue, regulations were set in motion, reflecting in the body of law the growing atmosphere of the country. Making use of the Turkish Criminal Code, Articles 301 and 216, it became easier to silence even the simplest of criticism on the grounds of insulting Turkishness and the organs of the state and provoking hatred and hostility. In 2005, the Turkish Criminal Code and the next year, anti-terrorist law were changed in ways that greatly restricted freedoms. The scope of crime of terror was significantly broadened, and the very definition of terror was blurred as much as possible. Press offenses, which within the framework of the EU reform packages were converted from prison sentences to monetary fines, again became punishable by imprisonment. The right of defense was restricted. The authority of security forces to use weapons was broadened. And 15-year-olds began to be counted as terror criminals and subjected to the same procedures and treatments as adults. By mid-2013, the transition from democratic reformist AKP to oppressive AKP had begun. The Gezi Park protests, which developed spontaneously in late May 2013 as an act of protecting the environment, were met with disproportionate responses by security forces, gas, tear gas. The repression following such changes in the social atmosphere began after the 2016 coup attempt perpetrated by Gülen community, until then a staunch partner of the Erdogan regime. Oppositional groups of all sorts with no connection whatsoever to the coup, in particular leftists, Kemalists, and Kurds with no relationship to either fundamentalist Islam or the Guven community were subjected to heavy repression. In the state of emergency, we call it OHAL, which was announced on July 2016, lifted on July 2018, and renewed 7 times every 3 months until OHAL became now a permanent state of affairs. People were arrested without even taking statements at the police and dismissed close to 130,000 people from their jobs, academics at the universities in particular. They couldn't dismiss me because I was already a retired academician. These forms of oppression were implemented through OHAL statutory decrees and administrative decisions with no possibility of judicial recourse. From July 2016 onward, these forms of oppression have continued through the removal of elected mayors from office and the appointment in their state of province governors as trustees, especially in Kurdish areas, Kurdish municipalities. During all this time, AKP benefited greatly from the tactic of victimhood, as Hafsa tried to say. Having previously benefited from the chosen trauma of 1930s Kemalist nationalism, not allowing headscarved students onto university campuses, when the July 2016 coup attempted occurred, AKP activated in place of headscarves and students the image of FETÖ, the Fethullahi terrorist, as a symbol of victimhood. Such a mindset inevitably paved the way for 3 forms of chains of related error: discrimination, hate speech, and hate crimes. Today in Turkey, in a period of power that constantly polarizes society, it is not possible to say that the judiciary, shaped by a council appointed by President Erdogan and his party in power, has tried to prevent such incidents by implementing the legal grounds, that is to say, laws and international agreements. The reasons, very quickly, for this can be listed as: 1. In Turkey, the concepts of hate and discrimination have yet to really sink in, and in the judiciary, which is neither independent nor impartial, they haven't yet at all. 2. Turkey is a country where civil society is still at a very early stage of development, whilst organs and officials that represent the state government, the state or the government, as they say in the United States, are historically at a maximum in terms of their power to impact society. In such a country, the hate and discrimination-laced messages of government bodies and officials force people and communities to act in one single direction, that is to say, that of the ruling official ideology. 3. In the lawsuits of those sectors most subjected to hatred and discrimination, it is quite rare that criminal provisions that possess the potential to effectively prevent hatred and discrimination are actually implemented. 4. As a result of all this, thanks to the impunity that have enjoyed, those who commit discrimination and hate crimes are emboldened, and judiciary power, rather than stopping or at least deterring these incidents, makes possible their repetition. In other words, an exclusionary ideology that overlaps with culturalism finds itself in its most innocent state in the following sentence: they don't live like us. They are not like us. Usually defined as loving one's nation and the state, nationalism in Turkey, whether Kemalist nationalist or Turco-Islamist religious nationalist in orientation, sees minorities as harmful elements. This does serious damage to both the nation and the state in three senses. One, it prevents the development of democracy, which is by its most basic definition means respect for people, respect for the individual. Two, it divides the nation. And three, it weakens the state to the outside. Now, as for the foreign policy of today's Turkey, which is very much affected by the domestic environment that I tried to describe as far as here. Minorities also play into AKP's aggressive foreign policy, which nowadays has expansionist ambitions towards the South. Generally, the craft of imperialism, as perfected by the West in 19th and 20th centuries, seeks four goals: gain international reputation, gain approval from domestic supporters, silence the domestic opposition, and realize the pursuit of economic interests. Every military occupation is not imperialism on its own, to say the truth. However, military occupation is the must-have of imperialism and is now rarely seen because it generates significant backlash in the occupied country, turning events against the occupier. Just remember Bush Jr. in Iraq in 2003. Therefore, powerful states seeking to spread with the mentioned four goals, no longer send armies. Instead, they employ other methods to expand. One, multinational companies starting in the 1970s. Two, the communication revolution in the 1980s. And three, unrivaled hegemony beginning in the 1990s since the collapse of the Soviet Union. They now operate under slogans like invisible hand of the market, will of the international community, and bringing democracy. We call this the new colonialism, and better still, globalization. Globalization is a policy that has both its good and bad side, like everything. The typical example of its the positive side is the EU harmonization packages that I talked about, introduced in Turkey between 2001 and 2004 to compensate for the democracy deficit of the westernizing top-down revolution brought Mustafa Kemal Pasha Atatürk from the 1920s. As to its bad side, speaking of Turkey's involvement in the immediate neighborhood in the south, former foreign minister of AKP government Davutoğlu's soft power at the time was to send missionaries such as Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TİKA, such as Presidency for Turks Abroad and Related Communities, YTB, such as Presidency of Religious Affairs, called Diyanet in Turkey, and especially Gülenist Turkish schools. Trade companies were also sent, partisan contractors, the official contractor, TOKİ, etc. As the time went on, this soft approach was ended, and it was the turn of the Turkish armed forces. Operation Afraid Shield, Operation Olive Branch, Operation Peace Spring in Afrin, 12 military bases in Idlib, I'm talking about Syria. The official justification, if you want to know it, was crafted as preventing the attacks of the Kurds of Syria. However, there was no attack from Kurds in Syria. and it brought us face to face with a bizarre 19th century scheme as follows. One, the AKP-MHP government drew significant backlash from the West and the Arab world for sending troops to Syria and also to Iraq. In the middle of all this, it proceeded to convince its domestic supporters that Turkey is great and has gained international reputation. It said, everyone envies us. Two, it is naturally receiving approval from its nationalist supporters in Turkey. Three, and ironically, it feeds the domestic opposition nationalism and achieves success. In late August, for instance, opposition leader Kılıçdaroğlu said, "We believe in the legitimacy of Turkey's struggle on Syrian territories to ensure its own security." With such an opposition, who needs an aggressive government? And four, regarding the pursuit of economic interest, who would think of entering a quagmire like Syria, torn apart by civil war for economic gain? The AKP-MHP government did. After Operation Olive Branch, thousands of tons of olive oil were brought into the country from Afrin, controlled by Turkey's paid subcontractor, so-called the Free Syrian Army. Many people, like the Spanish newspaper El Público, Swiss parliamentarians, Swiss senators, the president of Spanish Olive Oil Exporters Association, all say the same thing. Turkey is selling Syrian olive oil as made in Turkey. Customs reports should be reviewed and products tests should be conducted. Unfortunately, to say the last word, neither AKP's aggressive foreign policy nor its stance on minorities is set to change anytime soon. I'll finish here. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your, very significant remarks, Professor Orhan. And when I listened to you, how you combine the issue in Turkey, the domestic issue with, minorities, and how it affects the foreign policy. And it reminds me of Atatürk's word, peace at home, peace in the world, how it actually, manifests in itself when there is no peace at home, how it affects, neighborhood or even the whole world when you consider Turkey's role in the, global context. I have several questions, but I'm going to keep them for the Q&A session at the end. Now I will go on with Joyce Davis, our second speaker today. And Joyce Davis, let me introduce her herself, of course. Joyce Davis is the opinion editor for Penn Live and has a distinguished career working for some of the most respected media organizations in the United States and also in Europe, including NPR as the Middle East editor and deputy foreign editor, and Night Reader newspapers as deputy foreign editor and special correspondent, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty in Prague, Czech Republic as the Associate Director of Broadcasting, WHBG Channel 20 as the Supervisor, and WITF at a multimedia news organization that is an affiliate of National Public Radio as the Vice President of the content. And Joyce Davis worked as the Director of Communications for the city of Harrisburg as well, and founded the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg, and now is currently the president there in the World Affairs Council. In addition to her distinguished career in media and journalism as an award-winning journalist and internationally acclaimed author who has lived and worked around the globe. So I know that you follow Turkey closely, Joyce. I know that you are contributing to the cause a lot, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hafsai, and thank you all for inviting me to join this discussion. I have to tell you that the reason I'm here is because I am a journalist, and that I have worked abroad, including in Turkey. I was focused for many years on covering Turkish politics, also of covering Turkish-US relations. And in addition, I have spent a good part of my life working with US international broadcasting to advance press freedom around the world. And so I come to you today with grave concerns about press freedom, about freedom in general, in a country that I have come to both respect and to love. I have been many times in Turkey, and anyone who has ever visited that country knows of the extraordinary hospitality of the Turkish people, the fabulous culture, the arts, I mean, the food. I mean, you can go on and on of ways to appreciate Turkey and its contributions to the world. And so that is why, as I come to you today, I am bringing some news that I think we should all find alarming, especially those who consider themselves to be friends of the Turkish people and of Turkey. And so I will tell you that Turkey has fallen dramatically. According to the research and the reports of international press organizations, it has fallen dramatically in the esteem that countries, that other organizations have for those countries with free press. Now Turkey, according to the World Press Freedom Index, is ranking 165th of 180 countries. At the bottom. It is at the bottom of those countries that are considered having a free press. The 21st edition of the World Press Freedom Index, compiled by Reporters Without Borders, it said Turkey, even just a year ago, was a little bit better. It was 149th. That's still pretty bad, but it's dropped even from that horrible level. And so what is going on? It's going from problematic in the estimation of journalists around the world to very bad under the government of President Erdogan. It has increased its crackdown on journalists. It did it in the run-up to the presidential elections earlier this year and to the parliamentary elections. But this has been a trend that we have been seeing now since he came to power. In the first Press Freedom Index published in 2002, the year when he came to power, Turkey ranked 100th among 139 countries. And then it dropped to 151st. And it's just been a steady drop since then, according to Reporters Without Borders. Now, I'll tell you what Voice of America is saying. Voice of America is another arm of U.S. international broadcasting. And they have real concerns, as we heard from Hafsa, about how female journalists are persecuted and how they are treated. It shows that this country, Turkey, accounts for 1/5 of all violations of female journalists around the world. 1/5. It ranks, according to the Coalition for Women in Journalism, Turkey ranks the worst for violence against women and people who are considered non-binary. That is a horrible reputation to have. This organization has documented that Turkey made up more than 20% of all global violations against women in this category. According to the organization's president, the whole ecosystem in Turkey under Erdogan has been very, very hard on anyone who asks a question or who has a voice different from that of the one espoused by the government. And I have to tell you, as you all know, that we don't see things getting any better. Turkey, one of the main problems that international organizations that try to protect journalists have is this new disinformation law that has actually increased pressure on journalists. It is apparently another tool that is being used to persecute journalists, particularly investigative journalists, and it's particularly against those who try to get to what was the government's response to the earthquake that devastated the country. The journalists that tried to really report on how the government responded, whether it responded accurately, whether there were laws or policies in place that made the situation worse, that, none of that was able to really be delved in and reported because journalists were faced with such prosecution. They were imprisoned for criticizing the handling of the aftermath of the earthquake. They were criticized for anything to do with whether the government should have had policies in place that made the building safer. This is a grave concern. I don't have to tell you that a government and a people where you're not getting the truth, there's no way that you can have a democracy, anything near democracy, if you cannot have a free press that is delving into, and that is a watchdog on government. One of the strongest roles of the media in the United States is to be a watchdog on government. Now, we know, I can't tell you it's perfect in the United States because it isn't, but that is the role of the media, to protect the interests of the people by giving the people the truth about their government and their government politicians. So we see that these laws, this disinformation law, is being used to silence. And here's what is worse. Yes, you'll be imprisoned. Yes, but the self-censorship that happens when journalists are too afraid to do their jobs, when they're too afraid for their families and for their friends, right? That is a huge issue that I think the Turkish people should be concerned about. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Kurdish journalists who are facing significant threats. But frankly, no matter your ethnic group at all, anyone who wants to live in a society where they themselves are not persecuted and are not subject to harassment, they need to be concerned about this, because when it affects one group, it eventually affects everyone. Because at some point, you're going to be different from someone else in some form or fashion. And it's going to come. The laws, if they're not there to protect free speech, free press, are going to end up impacting everyone. But the persecution of Kurdish journalists has been particularly severe. Reporters Without Borders is called on Turkish authorities to release information about measures taken against the journalists, in particular against Kurdish journalists. They have been accused or suspected of belonging to terrorist groups. If you're just suspected, you've talked to someone, that seems to be enough of a reason to persecute Kurdish journalists, Kurdish media. And what the other issue is that the information, the reason behind the indictments aren't being made public, so that people really know what is behind this. And the Reporters Without Borders is calling that urgent action needs to be taken to protect and to avoid abusive arrests of journalists in Kurdish, but all journalists. And they are saying that Turkey has become the biggest prison for journalists in the world. Please hear that. Turkey has become the biggest prison for journalists in the world. It has, without cause and without warrant, simply harassed and imprisoned journalists of every stripe. And they can be imprisoned without being charged, and of course, without being convicted. So again, we focused on the issues of women. We focused on the Kurdish. We focused on this new law that is being used as a weapon against journalists. But the other issue is that it isn't just the Erdogan, but the Reporters Without Borders was asking, and is still asking, for everyone, opponent candidates, everyone to stand up and to make their voices heard on this. It is calling for people with a conscience to actively defend press freedom. And also, you can't have press freedom without an independent judiciary to protect, that will allow journalists to be protected in the courts. They're calling for adoption of a legislative and regulatory framework that will guarantee media freedom and independence. Now, here are some of the specific things that the international journalist organizations are calling. Again, restore the judicial system's independence and autonomy so that it functions as a guarantor of freedoms, including press and journalistic freedom. Ensure the judiciary independence and autonomy. In particular, they want to guarantee the independence of the Supreme Council of the Judiciary to end political interference in cases involving journalists. They also want to guarantee the independence of justices of the peace and modify their powers to prevent abuses involving arrest and imprisonment of journalists and internet censorship. That is the other issue that's going on, the attempts to censor and to crack down on even anything that is going on social media. This organization, along with others, are calling for respect for the primacy of the European Court of Human Rights, their case law, and the Turkish Constitutional Court's rulings as established in Turkey's 1982 constitution. There is belief that this will safeguard respect for press freedom and the right to news and information being freely distributed. They also are calling for judges, magistrates, and police investigators to be trained in understanding press freedom and to understand what international standards are for this. I was very struck by Professor Baskin explaining how civil society is just beginning to be developed, but so people need to be trained to understand what are international standards for protection of journalists and free speech. And overall, they want the legislative framework to reinforce press freedom and stop misuse of the criminal code against journalists. They want to ensure that criminal and counterterrorism laws can't be used against journalists and other sources of independent and critical reporting and opinion. They are asking for an overhaul of the criminal code to safeguard respect for press freedom, including repealing articles about insulting the president, denigrating state institutions. They want decriminalization of these insult and defamation in line with international standards. Reinforce legislation on the right of access to state-held information. One of the things that we enjoy in this country and in others is the right to request information that the government has, as long as it is not a privacy issue for an individual, or as long as it is not a threat to national security. We have the right to see what the information the state has, and to reinforce legislation protecting journalists against gag suits, so all of this basically is trying to let the Turkish people know, and those that have any conscience and power, that something must be done right now, because I don't see how Turkey can get any worse. There's a lot more that they're calling for, but it all comes along with the only way to protect democracy, the only way to ensure that all Turkish people have their rights protected, is to protect journalists, to stand with them. And so with that, I will leave it with you, but I'll let you know that we will continue to follow these issues. There are many names of journalists that we are going to put out who are in prison and that we're calling for their release. And I just urge all journalists around the world to check this out, to stand with these journalists and to make sure they are not forgotten and that pressure is put on a country that we all know is so vitally important to global stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. It was just kind of a manifestation of media that you all said. And you touched on the disinformation laws, which are used as a proxy by Erdogan regime to silence not only media but also all the people of Turkey. That was very important that you highlighted. And also there is a invisible guidebook or handbook for authoritarians. They are employing it, applying in their own countries, and media is one of the very important initial things to be silenced, which is just you like underline, it's a watchdog on the government. And if there is no press, that you said, there is no chance for the people to see the truth. So I think the abuse of laws or anti-terror laws, and which are also used to silence the media, Mr. Kurşun is gonna touch on them too. Now thank you so much again, Joyce, and I'm turning into Mr. Kurşun or Dr. Kurşun. Dr. Kurşun was an assistant professor of criminal and procedural law in Çukurova University in Adana before he dismissed from the office with a statutory decree in November 2016. He's a member of 18th Sen Union, and he was writing human rights and criminal law-based critical columns in Daily Today Zaman. Because of his critical columns towards the government, he was tried in Adana and acquitted. He was involved in the group Istanbul 10 that was taken into custody in Büyükada, Istanbul in July 2017. He was under detention for 100 days in Silivri, which is a very famous prison right now in Turkey. He was the president of Izmir-based Human Rights Agenda Association, which is now the representative to Ankara. He is one of the founders of Amnesty International Turkey. His attorney license has been cancelled by the government. Previously, he has authored 4 books on International Criminal Court, the crime of genocide and Roma rights and discrimination, and numerous academic articles on various branches of human rights, criminal law, and criminology. Dr. Kurşun, whose attorney license was revoked and was not allowed to practice law for a long time, now is able to return to his profession after the acquittal decisions against him became final. He speaks English and is learning Italian. He is Ali Berk's father. So welcome, Dr. Kurşun. Thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Afsa Hanım. I sincerely thank you and the institution for this kind invitation and letting me speak with such distinguished speakers. I also celebrate your International Human Rights Day of 10th of December, and I hope this year brings us, both Turkey and the world, better days on behalf of human rights. If you let me share my screen, I have prepared a presentation for you, including some data about what has happened in Turkey in the recent years. Yeah, let me open it.
This is a democratic panel. Of course, I'm gonna let you share your screen. Yeah, I think you should be able to share your screen right now.
Right. Let me close it again because I have to reopen it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that working now?
Just a minute. I'll be ready.
Okay.
In seconds. I'm sorry for that.
No, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
perfect.
Are you able to see?
Yes. Yes,
screen?
we see your screen. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's start from the beginning. Okay. Well, As you said, I've got lots of identities and adventures. I am dismissed by one of the statutory degrees from the university, and I have been involved in the group called Istanbul 10 during a human rights workshop in which I have involved dozens of similar previously. A police raid happened in the summer of 2017, and our group has been first taken into custody, and then we have detained, and I have spent 13 days in Istanbul Anti-Terror Law Department, Istanbul Police Department, and then we have been detained, and I have spent 100 days in Istanbul Silivri prison. I am grateful for my state. Thus, my state allowed me to practice the concepts which I was lecturing in the university, like detention, custody, these kind of criminal procedural law concepts, and led me to test it from the first hand. So I'm thankful for my state. On the other hand, this is only a joke, by the way. There are many thousands of people who have been purged from their positions. But the first thing that I would like to share with you is we have a lack of information in this country. The Turkish Statistical Institute or Minister of Justice's Judicial Statistics Department hide information on this issue, so we are not able to collect the full data. Even we don't know the exact number of people who have been dismissed by the statutory decrees during the after coup d'etat attempt and emergency law era. But as much as we have calculated, there are some infographics like this. I have taken this from KHK Platformları Birliği in Turkish, the Union of Statutory Degrees Purged Public Officials. According to the data we have gathered, in the post-purge penal law aspect, there are more than 2.2 million criminal investigations happened. So it means that 2.2 million files, criminal files, at public prosecutors' offices within anti-terror law. So this number is more than many countries' whole population. So we are complaining about the slowness of the criminal justice system in Turkey, but with these numbers, it can't be faster, in my opinion. More than 700,000 people were investigated, and around 70,000 investigations are ongoing as of today, where 27,000 prosecutions are ongoing in the courts. If you look at the decisions on the verdicts, there are more than 150,000 of condemnation or deferral of announcement of the verdict, where 3,500 lack of grants for legal action, and around 100,000 of acquittal decision, even in this poor criminal justice system. So if you see, the number of acquittals are nearly the same of number of condemnation decisions. So this issue is giving the full picture, in my opinion, by means of criminal law. As I said before, we are not sure about the exact numbers, but more than 600,000 people have been taken into custody after July 2016. And more than 500,000 of them are detained by courts, where 400,000 of them are men and 100,000 are women. More than 3,000 children even today stay in prison. with their mothers or fathers. At least 864 babies, these are less than 1 year of age, are staying in prison as of today, which is, in my opinion, another aspect of violation of human rights. If you look in the number of purged public officers, we see that even though there's no exact number again, we have a number, we have taken it from the European Commission delegation here in Ankara. Several times we have asked to the Minister of Interior or Minister of Justice about how many people have been purged, how many public officers have been purged legally. There is no answer from the government side. But when the EU, the European Union, asked to the state, they have given a number that 152,000 public officials have been dismissed by the statutory decrees. So if you count the private sector workers who have lost their jobs by the allegations, by the criminal allegations, it makes more than 300,000 of people have lost their jobs. At least 50,000 of them were teachers. 7,000 of them were health workers, including nurses and doctors. At least 7,000 of academicians like myself. At least 32,000 public police officers and 13,000 military personnel have been dismissed. And if you look in the private sector, my prediction is more than 200,000 workers in the private sector indirectly lost their jobs within the criminal allegations after the attempt coup d'etat of 2016. There is a big stigmatization in the society right now in Turkey. It has two aspects. One of them is social exclusion. We hear some very bad stories about this issue, that the families refuse their children just because they become, in quotas, terrorists. You are a terrorist and you are not our children anymore. So I have heard dozens of stories like this. But the second aspect is much more important, in my opinion, because there are big problems on education, housing, health, and employment side, which is for pillars of a human being to stand for or carry on its life. There are some key European Court of Human Rights decisions, which I will not go in detail with these decisions, and I hope in the coming speeches there will be more, much more to speak about these issues. But the European Court of Human Rights defined this issue as a civilian death of a person. So as of today, I'm not able to lecture law in Faculty of Law because they have dismissed me. I was writing daily columns in a newspaper. They don't let me to write anymore. In fact, most of the free media outlets have been closed in Turkey. There's no free media anymore. As Hafsa mentioned before, until very recent times, they don't let me to practice law. They have canceled my license of attorney, which I obtained 25 years ago. Because of my human rights work, they are taken into me jail for 100 days, 3 or 4 months, whatever. So this is, with the words of European Court of Human Rights, sending an individual to a civilian death. This term was first used in Buldu and Turkey decision in 2014. This was merely related with Jehovah's Witnesses group, and for the first time, European Court of Human Rights used this expression, sending an individual to a civilian death. But later, in Pishkin and Turkey decision, in Yalçın and Turkey decision, and in some other decisions related with purges happened in Lithuania and in Germany after the combining of two Germanys at the beginning of 1990s. So there was a lustration concept in these countries, but European Court of Human Rights have given such good decisions and put some principles on this lustration processes. These are quite crystal clear legal decisions which have to be obeyed. On the other hand, Turkey, as of today, doesn't obey to its own law. There are some legal crises between the Court of Cassation and Constitutional Court. And when a Constitutional Court gives a decision, a first instance court can easily say that we will not obey this decision. These are unbelievable things in a true democracy and rule of law state, but this can easily happen in Turkey today. The Constitution of Turkey, in Article 13, openly says that fundamental rights and freedoms may be restricted only by law and in conformity with the reasons mentioned in the relevant articles of the Constitution without infringing upon their essence. These restrictions shall not be contrary to the letter and spirit of the Constitution and the requirements of the democratic order of the society and the secular republic and the principle of proportionality. This Article 13 is the most violated article of the Constitution in the last 7 years. And in Article 70 of the same Constitution, it says every Turk has the right to enter the public service. No criteria other than the qualifications for the office concerned shall be taken into consideration for recruitment in the public service. This is a basic principle in nearly in every constitutions. It is included, but Turkey doesn't obey to its own constitutional articles with its actions. When we look in the anti-terror law of Turkey, we see two basic things again. One, the terror definition is too broad, and it doesn't follow the international standards. There is a very interesting statistics in my hand. I have counted it myself. This anti-terror law was dated 1991. It entered into force in 1991, and it is still in power. And after 1991, 55 times it was amended. And 25 times of these amendments were happened just after July 2016, or between July 2016 and July 2018, during the emergency law era. 25 times. We know as a legal standard that if you amend a law, it loses its own harmonization, the harmonization between the articles of the law. But if you amend it 55 times, we are not able to speak about the concept of harmonization in total. So during the emergency law era, the Republic of Turkey has amended its anti-terror law 25 times, which means that Turkey tried to adjust its law to this situation. I mean, whenever a situation happened, it amended the anti-terror law, tried to fit it to the situation, which was basically not acceptable in international standards. So what will happen afterwards? In my opinion, I see no light at the end of the tunnel. We are at a tunnel at the moment. I believe that several times Turkey has entered these kind of tunnels before in its history, and we don't look in our past, and we don't take any lessons from that. So confrontation with the past is a key concept, in my opinion. We didn't confront it with our past, and we are not able to build up a clear future for ourselves in real. We didn't confront it with the 1915 Armenian genocide issue. And without understanding fully this issue, you cannot define 1937 Thrace pogroms, which has happened to the Jewish community living in Edirne during 1930s. If you do not confront with it, you cannot understand 1942 the tax towards the minorities. If you do not confront with that reality, you cannot define 6-7 September 1955 pogroms towards the Greek and Armenian and Jewish communities living in Istanbul. If you do not confront with these realities, you cannot understand what has happened in Kahramanmaraş or in Çorum or in Sivas massacres. The Sivas events have happened in 1993. It is currently, I mean, it is quite new. Everyone remembers it quite well. So we did not confront it with our past. We did not take lessons from what has happened in 12th of September 2080 coup d'etat. We did not confront it with 28 February 1997 events. And if we do not confront with these parts of our history, in my opinion, we will not be able to understand what is happening today. So, as I said before, I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, but I am still optimistic. If we try to understand what is happening in real in Turkey, if we come together, if we speak aloud about the human rights, about freedom of expression, about freedom of press, about the right to a fair trial, about the discrimination in all branches of society. If we start to speak about women's rights, if we start to speak about LGBT rights, I think we will be able to build up a much more clear future for our children. So this is the only chance for ourselves. I don't expect that anyone will come and save us. No one will come and save us from neither from abroad, not from the moon or the space. We are the only people who will build up our future. So we have to stay strong. We have to resist. We have to keep on demanding human rights, our rights, and I'm sure that we will win at the end. Probably no one will see from our generation. Probably I will not see, but I'm sure that somebody will see it in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I cannot tell that if now we are left in an optimistic or pessimistic mood right now, but underlining the huge, statistics after the in the aftermath of the 2016 coup, the public, officers or other people, women who are incarcerated just in opposition to what law said. So abusing of laws actually is another very important point in the handbooks of the dictators. And actually, I really like that you underlined at the end of your speech that it's not gonna be, the salvation is not gonna be coming from the outside. If people of Turkey want real democracy, they have to unite, and then they have to speak a lot all together, right? Thank you so much. Now, before asking a question to Professor Orhan, I want to say to our audience that if you have questions or comments, please go and write in the chat box on YouTube right now. So, Professor Orhan, you told us that opposition is also not doing good, in a nutshell. And there is this understanding, global understanding, if you want to destroy or if you want to do something within a state, you need to design the opposition before the government. There is this understanding. Oppositions are very important. So combining with what Günal Kurşun told, that, the salvation is going to come from the inside of, through the people of Turkey. Is there any way to urge the government or to turn around all this electoral system and everything, getting democracy through the ballot boxes, to do something for opposition, to trigger them, to urge them what actually they should do against the authoritarian regime of Turkey? Because it doesn't seem to be possible to do something with the authoritarian regime right now. Erdogan is very powerful, has the almost half of the population support. So we have to go through, as I understand, opposition side too. Is there any way to make them what oppositions must do?
To whom are you asking?
You, Professor. My
sorry.
question is to you. Yeah.
Sorry. Could you put your question in one sentence?
Okay, what should we do to let opposition do their duty, do their responsibilities?
Right now, there is no opposition that normally should come from opposition parties. All parties are quote and unquote state parties. I personally believe in the exaggerations of Erdogan and his mistakes in finding a way to get out of that fix. I refer to 1950-1960 Democrat Party regime. After 1958, they went overboard. And unfortunately, there was a military coup. But fortunately, this military coup was not organized. So it had to bring in academicians to build a democratic constitution, the Constitution of 61. And after 61, until the end of 1970s, Turkey enjoyed the only democratic period of its social life. Now, as we tried to say, the AKP government, headed by President Erdogan, was unbelievably democratic during the 2 years of its power, 2003 and 2004. And especially since 2011, it's hell from the point of view of human and minority rights. And I believe that Turkey had to live through that period, unbelievable oppression period since 2011, and especially since 2013 that we're experiencing right now. We had to live through that period in order to transcend to a democratic period like we did after 1958 oppression. Unfortunately, social life has to suffer before salvation. Now we are suffering, and it's going to be salvation thanks to the mistakes and exaggerances of Erdogan one-man regime.
Do you mean, economic, sufferings, and also
economic suffering is for people in general. Democratic suffering is for the intellectuals and for those who oppose the government's policies, undemocratic policies. Economic policy, we need another hour to explain what has happened since 7 years. President Erdogan said, as long as there will be nas is Quranic order.
Yeah.
I will not raise the interest rate. And every time he lowered the interest rate. So his people, the holdings, were able to accumulate a lot of capital. And parallel to this, people got so poor that they are looking under the, how to say, they're going to the bazaar on Sundays and collect what other people get rid of to bring them to their children to eat. This is, as I say, in general for all Turkish people, but in addition for the intellectuals, for the democratic rights of the opposition, the two are combined, and it's unbelievably difficult to live in Turkey now.
But in the beginning of our talk discussion, before the live streaming, I saw you very hopeful in terms of the upcoming future. Are you optimistic, Professor Oral?
Of course I am, thanks to Erdogan's oppression. Do you understand that? Thanks to Erdogan's oppression, thanks to Erdogan's one-man regime, I'm hopeful, because Turkey is a country of 100 years since 1923. This is not a country set up 10 days ago.
Yes, you're right.
Turkey will not take that.
We have strong roots in terms of, a republic, in terms of people's understandings. Yeah, we are hoping the same thing. We are on the same page with you that Turkey will become a very good place in terms of human rights, democracy, and economics very soon. Professor Orhan, thank you. I have a question from the audience on YouTube. I want to ask this question all the audience, but actually the person says that I would like to ask Dr. Orhan and Davis of their suggestion to bring more international involvement to degrading situation in Turkey. Actually, that was my question too, because Joyce, you underlined that, you know, as other organizations, global organizations, we are trying to be a voice of those journalists in Turkey, which you described as the biggest jail for journalists and media, you know, representatives. Do you think, you know, the outsider organizations, especially for media, can do something?
Yes, I think they can do a lot. And I think clearly even Erdogan wants to be respected around the world and wants to have doors open to him and wants to maintain some degree of, you know, respectability around the world. So the fact that these organizations continue to shine a spotlight and continue to put pressure, for example, on American elected officials to make sure these issues are brought up when they meet with Turkish officials. I think international pressure and the media, and we're the only ones that can actually tell the truth without getting around, not in Turkey. So we're the only ones that can make this the Turkish people aware, but also the international community aware. And things like this are doing a great deal of help to get the word out and to give the international media the truth about what's going on. The other thing I would say, though, is I do think that those people are concerned should make use of things like writing op-eds, writing letters to the editor, to the major newspapers, New York Times, the Washington Post, and ours, the Penn Live. If you write to me, we will make sure that it gets published with the facts. So the steady drumbeat in the international media, I think, would be very, very helpful. And don't underestimate how much these things are read and by how many people they are read.
Yeah, you're right, actually. International organizations, also dissidents, exiled journalists, you know, coming from Turkey, they are doing a great job too. Thank you. And the last question, because we are coming to the end, there is a question on YouTube, and I'm gonna try, you know, combine both of them with my question. So, Dr. Kurşun, you said that, you know, there are actually judgments coming from ECHR or other organizations which are urging the Supreme Court, the Constitution in Turkey, to implement them. So the last one was the Yalçınkaya judgment from the ECHR, which is actually a sample judgment for, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. Now Turkey is seeming to be reluctant to implement this judgment. Is there any way going through other paths to urge Turkish regime to implement this law in Turkey, or do you see any chance, any opportunity that AKP or, you know, Erdogan regime is gonna apply this judgment, ECHR judgment?
Well, thank you very much, Hafsa Hanım. In the Yalçınkaya versus Turkey decision, the European Court of Human Rights underlined the Article 7 of the European Convention of Human Rights, which is dealing with a basic criminal law principle, meaning no punishment or crime without law.
Yeah.
Nullum crimen sine lege, nulla poena sine lege in Latin. This is not a new principle of law. This is 4,000 years of age, coming from the Sumerian or Hittite times. Even in Roman law, it has its grounds. But Turkey simply violates this old provision of law without any hesitation. The European Court of Human Rights underlined this situation and wanted Turkey to act in accordance with the law principles. So this is a very, very easy issue to understand at some point, but it is much more complicated in other aspects of law. I am fully in accordance with Professor Baskın Oran that he said this same political movement it was. I remember myself receiving this thick official gazette every year during 2003, 2004. It was fantastic human rights based atmosphere, full of the accession talks with the European Union was carrying on, and there was a fantastic reformist atmosphere. But as a human rights defender and a criminal lawyer, I cannot say that I have seen any steps taken forward after the year 2006. And starting from 2010, we have seen, we have observed steps taken backwards, especially by means of women's rights or LGBT rights, etc. And starting from the year 2016, everything is collapsed in Turkey. There is no way to speak about a rule of law in total. I believe that the half of the burden here is all over European Union's shoulders, because they couldn't decide on time about Turkey. This was a critical moment. Exactly, this was a critical. Yeah.
I was just saying,
please carry on.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Justice delayed is justice denied, actually. Just, ECHR's,
Exactly. They couldn't taken a decision for Turkey at the right moment. So everything is gone bad. So this is by means of human rights. This has another aspect. During my first years when I was in Amnesty International Turkey, at that time, like 20 years ago, the Amnesty International, the whole world movement was issuing country campaigns. And in that year, the subject country was Azerbaijan. And we were working, studying Azerbaijan's democracy, and we were seeing that the execution power was one man. It was the father Aliyev at that time. The legislation was controlled by one man because Aliyev was deciding who will be the member of parliaments. He was appointing the member of parliaments. The judiciary was fully controlled by one man because he was appointing the judges himself. The whole media was belonging to one man and controlled by one man. So we were describing this country as a full dictatorship at that time. Today, Turkey is worse than that.
Unfortunately.
Even I will say the same thing. I am spending most of my time with teenagers and young people in the university, because I am a student in university in Italian literature department. I am speaking with them, and I am saying that they are not happy with their future.
Yeah,
they do not trust on the state. So this is the biggest thing, biggest opportunity, in my opinion. The young people are able to change many things. We know this from his history. So let's keep on trusting the young generation. I sincerely believe that they will demand a better life. They will demand their rights. They will demand better human rights records. They will demand better economy. They will demand a better life. So this demand will change many things.
Yeah. So to wrap up, the change will come from the inside, not from top to bottom, but from bottom to up, hopefully. So it was a very productive, awesome discussion today. Thank you for all your remarks, your input in terms of democratic backslide in Turkey and what to do to, you know, get on track in terms of democracy and human rights. We are gonna be here in half an hour for another panel. Please join us and happy Human Rights Day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.